Hello and welcome to my studio. In this video I'm going to show you how I made this picture. Getting it right in camera will not only save hours of post-production, but for me, a better sense of achievement. Overcoming the various challenges of exposure, lighting and composition, to end up with an image worthy of the effort. And in this video I'm going to show you exactly how I did it. Okay. So the first thing to do will be to build the set. So what I'm going to do is just place a covering on this table. There we are. So this Hessian will form the background to the image. Now just to make it come up a little at the back here, what I'm going to do is just put a C-stand along the back so that I can put this up in the air a little at the back like that. There we are. And I can just clamp that on like so. There we are. Okay, so that forms the background for what will be our image. So the next thing to do would be to set up the camera position. Now at the front here I've got a tripod and I'm going to put my camera on the top of this tripod here. So I'm using a medium format camera with a 120mm macro lens on the front of it. So in full format terms, you'll get a similar field of view from something like a 75mm. Okay, just pop that on there like that. And this camera is tethered into Capture One software. That way it's easy to follow along and see the results as I get them. Right, so with that we'll just turn the camera on. There we are, and the software has recognized the camera. And we can see all the settings that I have on the camera mirrored in the software here. So it's in full manual mode. At the moment it has a shutter speed of 1/30th of a second, ISO 100 and an aperture of f4, which is wide open for this particular lens. Right, so the next thing to do would be to actually set all the subject on the table here. So I'm going to start with the background. And I'm just going to put an old pair of scales here. And then I'm going to place a breadboard. Now that's going to form the main part of my image, and I'm just going to place on here some cherries and some pancakes, etc., just to build up the shot. And the star of the show will be this cherry, which, just to make sure it stands up as I want, I've placed a small amount of blue tack at the back here. So from the camera's point of view, you won't see the blue tack, but it just stops the cherry falling over. There we go. And with that, I'll add a few more cherries around the set. There we are. Now to set the final position for all of this, what I'm going to actually do is turn on live view. That way I can see a live picture in the monitor here from the camera. And now by looking at the monitor, I can manipulate the subject until it's in exactly the right position. And that's a lot easier than trying to do everything looking down the viewfinder of the camera. Okay, and now I can move the subject until it's where I want it to be. Yeah, something like that, I think. Let's pop these bits back. Okay, so with that now all arranged, next thing to do would be just to check that composition in the camera just by taking a test image. And for lighting, I'm just going to use the house lights. And there we are. You can see the colour balance isn't quite right and the exposure is not right, but it gives you an idea of the overall composition. Okay. So with that little exercise out of the way, the next thing to do would be to reset the parameters so that I now cut out all of this light, so that any light which I add will be the only light which affects the subject. So what I'm going to do is change the shutter speed from 1/30th of a second to the flash sync speed for this camera, which is 1/125th. I'll leave the ISO as it is, and I'm going to change the aperture from f4 to a more reasonable f11. There we go. So at these new settings, I'll grab another image and hopefully I'll end up with a black picture. There we are. There is a very slight ghost of an image in there but nothing to be bothered about. So now I can set the flash. So what I want to do is have a very directional light for this. So I'm going to set a flash around here somewhere. Here we are. So just a bare flash head about here somewhere, pointing vaguely at the subject. Now I haven't set a specific energy for that, it's just at an arbitrary level, so I'll grab an image and then we'll set the exposure. Right, so we can see from that it's down quite a long way. I think I need probably 2 stops of energy. So what I can do is add 2 stops of energy to that light through the flash sync trigger, which on this camera is built in. So I'll just bring up the flash sync trigger, that light is selected, and I'll add 2 stops. There we go. With that, grab it again, see how that's affected the exposure. Yes, that's brought it all back up again. So there's a few things to notice about this. One is the general quality of light. It's all very hard, there's no graduation as such, and also I think I can see a reflection of the blue tack just holding up this cherry, which doesn't look particularly good. So I'll adjust that in a moment, but the first thing to do would be to address the general quality of the light here. So what I want is something a little softer. So I'm going to add a 1/4 stop silk on a frame around here somewhere. There we are. Now this is my preferred method, and that's because this gives you a lot more control. I could just put a softbox on the light, but then it wouldn't give me any graduation. This way I end up with a highlight caused by the light on the silk here, which will then reflect, hopefully, in the subject. Okay, so with that in position, let's give it a go and see what happens. And there we are, you can see that that's changed the quality of the light quite substantially. We have a highlight, but we also have a graduation. So this is what we had before, and you can see you've got a sharp highlight and you've got sharp shadows, and this is what I've got now. So the shadows are a lot softer, and the highlight is more of a graduation. So I think that looks quite a lot nicer. Also, I've moved this cherry just to hide the blue tack that was behind it. Okay, so it's starting to get there, and because I've composed the image using live view, it's about right as it is. But the lighting is still not quite right yet. I think some of these areas are a little overlit, and I'd like to just bring out the main subject by darkening down, especially this foreground, I think. So one thing at a time, the first thing to do would just be to darken down generally the background. So to do that, I'm just going to use a piece of black cloth, and I'm just going to attach it to the scrim at this end, just like that. There we are. So hopefully, with this black cloth being in this position, it should just shade off this background area. We'll see what it looks like. Yes, that's better. It's taken down all this background, which is exactly what I want. So this is what we had before, and this is what I've got now. So the next thing I want to do is just address this part here, and I'd just like to take that bit down as well. So in order to take that down, I'm going to use this flag and a piece of wood just to prop it up on, but so I can actually see what I'm doing, I'm going to turn the modelling light on this flash, and I'll turn the house lights out. There we are. So with that set, what I can do now is just place this black card in position at the back here. And what I'm trying to do is just place this in such a orientation that it cuts out just the light that I want. So if I just place this about here, there, I think that's doing what I want. Okay, so with that set, I'll grab an image and see if it's in the right position. Yep, that's taken down this bit. So this is what we had before, and this is what I've got now. Now I want to do the same thing with this area at the front. So yet another piece of card, and I'm just going to place this in the scene and just clamp it in position with this clamp. There we are, we'll try that and see what it looks like now. Yep, that seems to have worked. So this is what we had before, and this is what it was originally, and this is what it looks like now. So it's considerably better. Okay, so it's nearly there, but not quite. What I'm going to do is just use this piece of white card just to add a little more light to this side, the shadow side. So I'm just going to hold this in position, and I'm just going to hold it up here, something like that, and we'll just grab an image and see what that looks like. And you can see that that has actually lightened up this side, but it's done it too much. This is what we had before, and this is what I've got now. So I actually want to take the intensity down a little. Now I could move the card further away, but that would make the highlight smaller. Let me show you what I mean. If I hold the card back here, and we just grab an image, that's taken the intensity down, but the highlight on the side here has now become smaller and is a little intrusive. Also, I can still see the blue tack, so I need to move this cherry slightly anyway. So a little trick you can use if you want to just have some fill-in, but also keep the card or whatever it is you're using very close, but still control its exposure, is to use a grey card. So on the other side of this piece of card, it's grey. So if I put the grey side towards the subject, like so, and now grab an image, there we are. I think that's quite successful. So with that little bit of fill-in, it's just lifted this side. So if I just go to the original image before I put the card in, it was like that. And then I put the card in with the white side towards the subject, and I ended up with this. So it's overlit this side slightly, and you have a relatively large highlight visible on this side of the cherry. So then I changed the position of the card and took it further back. So it's a better exposure along this side, but because it's further away, I've got more of a highlight spot here. So finally, by moving the card closer in, but using the grey side, I've lost that highlight here, but I've still got some fill-in down this side, which has worked quite well. Okay, so the next thing I want to do to this is just add a crop, which I can do with the cropping tool here. So I'll pick 16 by 9, as I'll be using this for video, and I'll just bring that in ever so slightly. There we are. So there we have it. That's the finished article straight out of the camera. And for me, I get more of a sense of achievement by doing that sort of thing in camera, as opposed to making all the adjustments within post-production. And I think the final image there speaks for itself. Okay, well, I hope you liked watching how I made that image, and if you like watching these sort of things, do click on the other images as they appear, and don't forget to subscribe. Oh, and hit the like button. Thank you very much for watching.